Hello everybody. In this video, I'm going to show you all how you can get the Ogre 3D files and resources that we need to work on the first half of the programming labs for the Game Engines class. So basically, at this point, we're ready to start looking at how you can actually use a graphics rendering engine and implement the functionalities, effectively your interactive functionalities that you would require to be able to build the game. And so Ogre, or Open Graphics Rendering Engine, or Open Graphics Rendering Engine, will allow us to do a lot of the needed functionalities. And it's based on C++, and so it's very, very nice and easy and convenient in terms of programming a 3D application, especially a 3D interactive application such as a game. Obviously, for having a full game engines, you require a lot of additional components that we talked about in the lecture portion of the class earlier. But at this point, the graphics engine is one of the most important ones, and we'll start working with the Ogre to be able to build our games in code before we move into an actual full-fledged game engines, which is going to be Unreal Engine 4. So first things first, in order for us to be able to access the Ogre, obviously you can go online from the ogre.org, which is the website of ogre3d.org, which is the website of the Ogre, or the development website for the Ogre project, and download the required binaries or the source files. For your convenience, I actually included those files on a public link that you can access and you can download. So in order to access that, you would go to the Ogre Resources tab on the left section of the class, and then when you open the tab up, you will see I have 3 links for you here. Obviously, we're going to use C++ compilers to be able to program and work with Ogre, and to get your copy of Visual Studio, either 2012 or 2013, which are going to be the ones that we're going to be using in this class. You will have to go to the DreamSparks website. So click on the link DreamSparks at UHV, and then you will be able to type in your student ID and your password. You will log in, and then you will be taken to the web store where you can download the proper version of Visual Studio for this class. Most of the programming that I will do, I'm going to use Visual Studio 2013, but you can also use Visual Studio 2012 to program your Ogre projects. The difference between the two is not really visible from your point of view, but you would have to download the proper version of Ogre 3D, either for Visual Studio 2012 or Visual Studio 2013. So the files for Ogre Visual Studio 2012 obviously are in the second link, and then the top link takes you to the files to Visual Studio 2013, or rather Ogre for Visual Studio 2013. The files that I have uploaded here are 32-bit files, or the x86 version. So when you're building your projects and you're working on configuration settings in Visual Studio, make sure that you're in Win32 configuration as opposed to Win64. So if you get an error that you don't realize and you don't know how to solve it, chances are you're probably targeting the wrong development environment. And we're going to use the x32, or rather the 32-bit applications, because that's probably the most safe in terms of everybody having access to a 32-bit compiler. But you would have to make sure that if you're programming with Visual Studio 2013, you need to download the Ogre for Visual Studio 2013 files. If you're working with Visual Studio 2012, you would have to download Visual Studio Ogre files for Visual Studio 2012. When you download these files, notice that there's the Visual Studio file is basically, say, VC12 and VC11. VC11 is effectively represents Visual Studio 2012 development, and VC12 represents Visual Studio 2013. So to access your files, go ahead and download the proper link, or click on the proper link, and then download the SDK for VC12 or VC11, basically Visual Studio 2013 or Visual Studio 2012. So if you click on either link, it will take you to the proper files. When you save these files in on your computer, they would be downloaded, and so you can download them and you place them on your local machine. And all you need to do is to decompress these files. So I have both of these files compressed, and then you right click on them, and then you just extract the files. You can extract files here. It'll basically takes your time, and then it would extract your file in the Ogre SDK -VC11. That's for the Visual Studio 2012. Or you can compress the other version for your Visual Studio 2013 applications. So I'm just going to basically cancel this. Okay. Once you decompress the files, they will be placed in wherever you downloaded them or wherever you decompressed them. Now, we would like to put these files, these SDKs, in a convenient location so that we could use that location in our project. So the simplest way is basically to create a folder under your C drive and then place these files in there. Now, to show you where I have placed my gaming-related SDKs, I've created them on the C drive a folder called Gaming Programs. And in the Gaming Programs, I created a folder called Ogre 1.9, and then you can place these files under Ogre 1.9 folder where you created. It becomes a little bit important for you to notice where these files got saved, because later down we will actually create an environment variable in our windows for these files, so that we will be able to use that environment variable to conveniently locate our libraries and header files from the SDK. So for your convenience, I created both of these SDK files there. Now, let's just explore the Visual Studio 2013 version. When you click on it, you will see inside you have a binaries folder. And in the binaries folder, you have a debug folder and then a release folder. And your minimal size release build. We will be working, at least on our projects, mostly in the debug development. So later down the road, I'll show you where you would access and you will locate the binaries of your project so that you will be able to run them. Effectively, if you look at this debug folder, you will see that you have a bunch of DLL files and a bunch of executable files that are going to be used as parts of the dynamically linked libraries for building and executing our Ogre projects. So that's the binaries folder. That's important for us. Also, we will have the include folder and the lib folder. So the include folder contains all of the header files that we need, and in the include folder you will have your Ogre folder and your OIS, or Ogre input-output system. And so these folders will obviously have all the header files that we would need to be able to run our programs, or rather program in this SDK. And obviously, the libraries, the static libraries, are in the lib folder. And again, just like the dynamically linked libraries folder, you would have a debug and a release version. And so you could actually target the specific configuration, debug configuration, when you're debugging, or the release configuration, which gives you a much more lighter weight build. And so, for example, if you open it up, you would see that you would have the Ogre main, Ogre overlay, Ogre paging, Ogre property, or OIS libraries. These are your static libraries that have the object files that you need, or the objects that you need. And obviously, the debug versions, they have an _D tag at the end of the file names there. I'll show you in the next video how you would actually use these folders for building your project. So these are all libraries that we need. Also, I included, or rather, the project comes with Boost libraries, and so we have all of the Boost components that Ogre utilizes. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use the libraries folder of our Boost as well in our projects a little bit later when we will be setting these up. So this is basically your Ogre SDK directory structure. Then again, 4 important locations that are of very importance for us are the binaries, and obviously we would want the debug folder of the binaries. Boost, which is basically the Boost libraries that Ogre utilizes, include library of our Ogre SDK, and the lib library of our Ogre SDK, which contains the static libraries that we need in our project. The structure for Ogre SDK for Visual Studio 2012 is also similar. So you've got obviously your binaries, you've got your Boost libraries, which is a much lighter version. You've got your include libraries, and you've got your lib libraries. The Visual Studio 2012 version also comes in with an entire Ogre project, which basically contains a lot of source for samples and all sorts of things that you can use. We will not be getting into any of those details, but that's just something for you to kind of, if you wanted to play with some sample files and sample projects in Ogre, you could use those in the Visual Studios 2012 version. The 2013 version, I just have the bare bone Ogre, so we don't have any sample files or anything like that associated with it. So then again, what we did in terms of installing and downloading your project is you basically go to Blackboard, you go to Ogre Resources, you choose whichever Visual Studio version you have, 2012 or 2013, download the SDK, decompress it, and then create a convenient location on your C drive where you can actually access your files. So again, what I did is I created a folder called Gaming Programs, and inside of it I created a folder called Ogre 1.9, which is the latest version, and these SDKs are 1.9, and then just place the Ogre SDK folder that you decompressed into Ogre 1.9. So now that we have our project, our SDK placed in a convenient location for us, it's the time for us to go ahead and create an environment variable for our folder, so that we will be able to use in Visual Studio, basically this environment variable to identify the location where our Ogre SDK is on our local machine. To do that, the simplest way, in Windows at least, is you go to My Computer, and then right-click, and then click Properties. And then from the Properties section, you would see the Advanced System Settings. You click on Advanced System Settings, and then from the Advanced tab, you may be opening in the computer name or in Hardware tab. Just go on the Advanced tab and then click on Environment Variables. In the Environment Variables, you click on New, and then you'll be able to create the name of the variable and then the value for the variable, which will be the location where your Ogre SDK is. I have already created my Ogre Home _ VC12. So what I have for the VC12, which is the 2013 version of my Ogre SDK, I created an environment variable called Ogre _Home _VC12. And then for the value, it's the location where the Ogre SDK was placed, right? So that's already I have created. Now I'm going to show you how you can create it for the 2011 version or the 2012 version, just so you see. So you click on New for environment variables, and then here I'm going to call it Ogre Home _ VC11. And then for the path, you can type in C:\program files and all that, or you can simply go to where your Ogre SDK for Visual Studio 2012 was, click on the address bar, Control C or copy, and then paste. So then again, find the location of your SDK, click on the address bar, and then Control C or right click and then copy, and then right click and then paste in the variable value. And that will create the environment variable for you. So now I have an Ogre home for VC11 and an Ogre home for VC12, which is basically the VC11 is Visual Studio 2012 version, and the VC12 is the Visual Studio 2013 version. This creates the location environment variable for my project. Or for my SDK. We are going to use this variable for when we are setting up our project. It makes our lives a lot simpler and easier when we're setting up the projects in Visual Studio 2013 or Visual Studio 2012 if we know the Ogre variable, or rather the Ogre home variable that points to the SDK for us. So we just basically simply type down the name of our variable in the proper folders locations, and then we'll be able to access all of the required SDK files, include files, libraries, and all sorts of things, binaries, and everything that we need. So once your environment variables are set, you basically press OK. If a prompt shows up, you agree to it, or you say yes, and then you close your computer properties. So now, again, up to this point, we have downloaded and decompressed the Ogre SDK, including the Boost libraries within our Ogre SDK, and we have I showed you both of the versions that you can use for Visual Studio 2012 or Visual Studio 2013. It is totally up to you. You don't have to have both versions, and almost all of actually I think all of the code that we will be developing will be practically identical in both versions. So it really doesn't matter which SDK you download. Just make sure that the SDK you download is compatible with the Visual Studio you have. So if you have Visual Studio 2012 and you feel comfortable about it, download the 2012 SDK. And if you have Visual Studio 2013 and you feel comfortable about that, download the Visual Studio, download the SDK for Visual Studio 2013. Okay, now with this, I think we can wrap up this video, and then in the next video, I'll show you how you can set up a very bare bone basic Ogre project in Visual Studio 2013, and then that wraps up this this unit. I strongly urge you to play with the Ogre project and kind of change variables, change content with it a little bit here and there, and see how it looks like. Obviously, you may need to download some dependencies. Probably the most obvious one is the DirectX functionalities. On my machine, I already have DirectX 9 and DirectX 11, but I will target DirectX 9 subsystem. And if you get any errors and your project doesn't execute properly, you might want to update and go and get the DirectX 9 SDK and install it on your machine, so that at least on the lower end or lower level rendering mechanisms, your Ogre will be able to communicate with your graphics card on that level. So I'll see you in the next video.